So, my name is Erich Brogger, and we have Jett, Johnston, and Terence, Terence Smith, aka Joan Jett Black, and Baird, the most amazing DJ in San Francisco. So I guess for me, I was 17 when I moved into San Francisco, and the first place I ever moved was Folsom Street, and that was my intersection because I had one friend, and I was working at the Strand Theater, and there was a whole entire sort of group that I met in the South of Market, and they all congregated to the Stud, or Hamburger Mary's, and if anybody had ever experienced the Stud in say 75 to 84, you know exactly what the Stud was. I mean, it was the original location, mind you. It was ineffable. I mean, nobody, there's been so much written about the Stud, but I think Monday nights or Sunday nights was New Wave night, but it was always New Wave night or Punk night, it was such a cross section of people. And, they would joke about, oh, it's the bisexual San Francisco state crowd tonight. There were so many jokes about, who was there that night or whatever, but it was such an amazing place. And like I said, I worked at the Strand Theater, and that was another crossroads. I met so many people at the Strand Theater. I worked there from 1978 to about 1980. And then after that, my girlfriend and I at the time ended up stripping on Broadway as the love act, the naked Ishi love act. And we did that for about 2 years, and then we moved to Japan and worked for the Yakuza. That was another chapter, but as far as, when I did a little bit of research, and there's really not a lot out there. I mean, as far as, when you go to like basic, 0.1 or 00, a lot of stuff I kind of came up with the Warhol crowd. I mean, I think that, Eric Emerson, he had a band called the Magic Tramps in the late 60s, early 70s. And then I think there was, the New York Dolls, who were not necessarily gay, but just completely, created a whole entire genre. I mean, that's the great thing about this period. There were no labels. There were no, Dewey Decimal System. I'm, 40%, bondage dominant and 12% flotsam, jetsam, this and that. I mean, everybody was just kind of like, nobody had any labels at all. I mean, it was just, what you see is what you got. So, anyway, so a little bit of my research in this particular area, I used to come into the city on BART before I moved into the city, and the band that I loved so much was the Screamers. And, Tamara Duplanty started out as a Cockette. If you all don't know who the Cockettes were, that's like gay. Wait, that's like gay 1A, don't you think? I mean, come on. Yeah. Sylvester was a Cockette.
Cycle Sluts, too. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. I remember the pictures of the Cycle Sluts. But, yeah, I mean, the Screamers were so amazing because they threw out the whole guitar thing. They were completely involved in synthesizers, and they started in Seattle. They had, they were called the Whiz Kids, I think, in Seattle, and then they went back to LA in around 75 and created the Screamers, and they just were absolutely amazing. And they played a lot with Devo. They were kind of like the queer Devo in a weird way, I mean, the fact that they were just so in your face and no guitars. But anyway, so you know, I don't want to like necessarily, I don't want to say I want to out anybody. I mean, I can, you know, like provide amazing anecdotal information at your bequest, you know, privately, but, you know, it's not like, and, you know, as I was just talking to actually Mike a couple minutes ago about, you know, even not necessarily punk, but there's not that many books written about queer San Francisco, which I find absolutely amazing. There's a very scholarly book by a San Francisco State professor called Wide Open Town, and it's mostly about, it's up to 65, and it's actually really great for references because it talks about all the lesbian clubs in North Beach. You know, the Chi Chi Club used to be Mona's in the 30s and 40s. The Garden of Eden, now on Broadway, was a very famous lesbian nightclub, and where Specs is, that was another lesbian nightclub where you like took the that staircase down. So, you know, there's the really, on one side of the spectrum, there's a real scholarly part, and then we get to the point where the memoirs, and one, which I mentioned earlier, is a man named Adrian Brooks wrote a book about the Angels of Light, and this wonderful photographer included all the pictures for it. Danny Nicoletta, I don't know if anybody knows about Danny, but Danny is like the most incredible historian photographer from San Francisco. I mean, he grew up in Harvey Milk's camera store, and I mean, he's just absolutely amazing. And so he led all his beautiful photographs for Adrian's book, and he got so much flack because it was just so bitchy, and, you know, anyway, so there's, you know, the mean-spirited, bitchy queen kind of thing, and then there's the scholarly, make you fall asleep thing, and there's nothing really in between, you know, it's kind of a hard thing. So, anyway, so I would just like to, you know, raise the thing open and ask some of these guys, you know, it's kind of a tough subject because you don't want to pigeonhole, you don't want to talk about, you know, this and that, but one thing, I mean, as far as like, my first band that I was a real, other than the Screamers, that I actually was a super groupie for was Tuxedo Moon. And I would come in and take part and, you know, show up at Mabuhay, and I would get to run their movies. And also get Stephen Brown his Drambuie sodas every 20 minutes. But it was so much fun. And I mean, their band back then was like this Weimar cabaret meets, you know, the two Bowie albums like The Heroes and Low, and the saxophone and the oboe. And I mean, it was so beautiful. And a woman named Victoria Lowe sang for them, who became a really good friend of mine. And Winston Tong, of course, sang for them. My friend Gregory sang for them. And it was just unlike no other. I mean, I was 17 and it made such an incredible impact on me. And then after that, there was No Mercy. And No Mercy was two women, Tony Hotel and Esmeralda. And Tony played incredibly brilliant jazz drums. And Esmeralda was an incredibly brilliant singer. And they were totally in your face. And nobody else besides San Francisco had a No Mercy. I mean, if you've ever experienced seeing the No Mercy Joe Reese video or hearing them, I mean, Esmeralda was one of the few vocalists that you could actually understand her words. She enunciated her words, I mean, and you had to, I mean, she was very kind of verbal. So those two bands, I think, were it for me as far as that punk intersection where everything was very bent, kind of queer, but then a lot of stuff was, you know, bent and queer, and I identify with queer. I don't consider myself gay. I lived and grew and experienced queer, and I stand up for being queer, and I think it's a great definition that, you know, I live by to this day. I mean, you know, it's something that you know, it denotes rebellion, it denotes, you know, not following the you know, straight edge, and I don't know. I like the LPQT, I like the Q at the end of that. So, anyway, so I've known Jack Johnston since he was DJing at the Cafe Floor, and I was in a little funky band called The Situations in 1978-79, and he was kind of a fan of ours, and we met, and Situations always played with either Pink Section or the Mutants. That was kind of like this little group. And the Situations were a great band, two wonderful sisters. They were musical prodigies. Teresa Soder was 15 at the time. Janet was 17. And, you know, we just came in from the Burbs and started our own band kind of thing. And, you know, somebody was talking about being underage at a nightclub. It's like, what? Oh, The Sound of Music. I think Erich was talking about you couldn't be underage at The Sound of Music.
They made us way back behind the stage. They made us stay backstage.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the situation, we were 15, 16, and 17. I mean, Penelope was super young. I mean, I can't believe, I mean, we were seeing, you know, Crime and the Nuns at Mabuhay when we were like 14. There was no partying, thank God. We would take, you know, our Country Squire station wagon in from the Burbs, and would always stall right at the end of the Embarcadero Freeway, right at the like little hill there, right on Broadway. And I'd pray for it to get up to Brogger. It's like, come on, you can make it. But anyway, so Jack, he lives in Seattle now, and he had his own zine. He DJ'd at Cafe Floor. On, was it Monday nights?
Monday nights, yeah.
Monday nights was like the new wave punk night for the Stud and for the Cafe Floor, right?
Just, you know, one of the stories that a friend told me is that because we had Monday nights at Cafe Floor, that one night I had my records with me, of course, and we all went to the Stud and we were dancing to Alicia Bridges, I Love the Nightlife and all that, and then somebody was like egging me on anyway. Apparently I climbed up the stairs to the DJ booth and forced Larry to play some new wave and got the new wave started there. So somebody credited me with that. I don't know that I can claim that, but I'll tell the story, so we'll perpetuate that and say that I actually started new wave night at the Stud.
But also you guys...
Are you Jack fan?
No. I'm Vale. My name is B. Vale. I started at 15. I'm pretty influential. I've done a lot of good things for the Seattle, San Francisco scene.
And by the way, some brilliant person has done a Facebook page on the Cafe Floor, and it is absolutely incredible. I mean, just in the last 3 weeks, there's just been like this deluge of the most amazing photographs. There was that little, you know, that was another intersection. There was the New York Deli, Fanilla's. I don't know if anyone remembers Fanilla's.
The Palms?
Yeah, and the Cafe Floor, and, you know, that was like one of those little vortexes that everybody was involved with. But this Facebook page, I mean, everybody was, you know, beautiful and interesting, and nobody had really labels. I mean, it was just such a, you know, a magical time. But if you really want to check that out, the Cafe Floor.
Cafe Hairdo, we called it for a while.
And last night, Mark Eustace played Whatever Happened to Susan Jane, which is like the penultimate reportage of that particular period. It's just so amazing. It's about an hour long, and it's based on those kind of coronet films you grew up with when you were a kid, like Deportment, like what would Susie do on Halloween, you know, change your underwear and that kind of thing. And then, you know, fast forward to San Francisco in 1980, and it's just brilliant. Mark Eustace is kind of like our John Waters, so to speak. I mean, you know, he's great. Anyway, so
Can I start?
Yeah.
So I was Jack fan in the punk days, and so the intersection of punk and queer for me started when I moved here in '75 when I was 19. Bruce Springsteen, you know, that whole kind of thing, and quickly Patti Smith came out, and the boy looked at Johnny. Johnny wanted to run. That was just transformative for me there in '75, '76. Got to go see Patti Smith and stuff, and so for me there was always I didn't come out until, like, say, that October. I moved here in September, so it took me like a month to sort of realize that there was like this attraction for men at the ripe age of 19. So I started coming out. By the circle of older men that I found introduced me to a club called Gus's Pub out on Haight Street, Haight and Divisadero, block off from there. And so they got me in Gus's Pub, and we went to the Stud, so I could be introduced to those two bartenders. So I was in that gay scene, so the Stud was already a natural for me. And then, so jumping forward a couple of years, you know, getting more involved in the gay scene through the baths, basically, but as music started to get more and more interesting, I missed a good bit of '77, going out to Massachusetts to work with some photographers, but doing my own photography, being at the Art Institute, which certainly had its share of gay people. So I look at, like, for memory adjustments, I look at like James Stark's book that Research put out, and you look at the crowd, and it's just like coated with gay men. I mean, there's like the mustaches, the black leather, it's just like queer, 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 queer. And so we were just there. That was just sort of part of who was there at the Mabel once that started. So the Stud, Hamburger Mary's, that was big in that summer of '78. I started DJing with at Cafe Floor, because I had been doing some stuff in Massachusetts and I was trying to be big and be on the scene. I started doing posters for Situations. I did posters for my New Wave nights. Had met Don Vinyl, who's like as gay as you could be. He was never quiet about that. That first Aquarius Records was actually on 18th at Castro, just a block up from Castro before it moved up to the Harvey Mills store. So Aquarius Records, where I would do all my shopping, that was already there in the Castro. So Don Vinyl worked there. So the intersection of punk and queer was just from the start. I mean, that's just, you know, I was coming out, and so actually my gig at Cafe Floor brought me my first boyfriend, because he had seen me DJ at Cafe Floor and then seen me at the Maplehay, and so he stalked me to get to meet me there. Anyway, so that romance, me and Martin, came out of like being at Cafe Floor. So, and then I went on to DJ at Def Club, did a fanzine there. I don't know what else would be as far as this panel goes, but I think that's enough information for me.
Thank you, Jett. Thank you, Jett. Appreciate it. And Terence, aka Joan Jett Black. Now, I remember Terence from this incredible place on Knowing Market called Josie's Juice Joint. Anybody ever go to Josie's? And
Whoopi Goldberg got to start there.
Whoopi Goldberg did?
Yes, she did.
Really?
She did.
Oh, wow.
She did a show with us.
Anyway, Josie's, well, I mean, this is not our sort of period we're talking about. This is more like early 90s, right? Pretty much, Josie's.
Yeah, like, yeah. Because I moved here in '93.
Yeah, Justin Vivian Bond. If anybody had the incredible luck to see Kiki and Herb.
Stone Fox. Performed
The
there.
Kiki and Herb show. In fact, Kiki and Herb, they're going to do a something this spring, I think.
Justin was just on the cover of the Village Voice.
I know. Justin Vivian Bond, I mean, she is an absolute amazing beacon. I mean, if you want to like look at the whole trajectory of performance in the last 25 years, I mean, there's somebody. Anyway, so Terence.
Well, okay. I can trace it back to 1972. Then I bought a single by a man named David Bowie about Space Oddity, and I was the only one I knew who had this record, who heard this record, who knew who this man was. That opened up the door to Andy Warhol and everything else. So I was the coolest kid in high school, because I was in high school back then. But I went to a performing arts high school in Detroit. And so in '73, I saw the Ziggy Stardust tour, and I was never the same again. I shaved off my eyebrows. My mom and dad were like, who are you? Because, you know, no eyebrows and platform shoes. And You know, I call myself Nikki Stardust. Oh yeah, you can still be mad. And, but at the same time, mind you, this is Detroit. I saw the New York Dolls, and the opening band for the New York Dolls was the Indian Institute's hometown band. I used to go see Susie Quattro all the time. Remember Susie Quattro? All the time. MC5, and when we saw these people, they were right there. And the gay neighborhood in Detroit is one block of a street called 6 Mile. And there's 4 or 5 bars right there. There's Minjo's, there's Gagan's, and there's a couple more. Minjo's was the dance club, and Gagan was the drag club. And I was doing drag shows back then. And that club started the first punk night. And I can clearly remember when a friend of mine brought this album by a group called the Sex Pistols. We had read about it, but nobody could find this record. And he found this record, and before the night was over, we were tearing t-shirts and getting singing. Because nobody was doing it. And then they had this club night, and we went to this club night, and there were like 5 people there. But the 5 people there were more diverse than the gay bar next door that we were also going to. So we were living this life dictated by music and fashion. You had to have your disco clothes for disco night, and you had to have your punk clothes for punk night. You know, you couldn't wear your bell bottoms to punk night. You couldn't. But so then in '77, I moved to Chicago, and I had a friend that worked at the Pleasure Chest. Remember the Pleasure Chest? Anybody? It was before Good Vibrations. It was a porn store. And I had a T-shirt that said, "Beat me, bite me, whip me, fuck me like the dirty pig that I am. Come all over my tits, tell me that you love me, and then get the fuck out." I thought I would be the only person to wear this shirt. The first fucking day I wear this shirt, I'm walking down the street, and here comes somebody else coming toward me in the same shirt. So of course, we were either gonna kill each other or become friends. We became friends. His name was John Calendo, and he wrote this play. John Calendo also wrote for In Touch magazine and all these, an interview magazine. And I was in this play that he did. And we were doing, there's a club in Chicago on Halsted Street. It was called Baird, and it was the first, built back then, 1977, as the first punk dance club in the country. They didn't do shows, it was a dance club. And they've just blown up again on Facebook, the 8 people that are still alive, because that's true. It was a long time ago and so many people are gone. But looking at those pictures, it was so amazing to see, you'd see, I was one of the 2 or 3 Black Knights, but that's okay, here I am, right? But it was great to see women, and it was great to see men, it was great to see, that's where the Misfits went. That's where you went when you couldn't stand dance music constantly. And they also had a ska night, and I had been into reggae for a long time, and reggae is not known for being, nice to gay people. They don't get it. But you could go to ska night, and it seemed to be no accident that I believe Terry Hall, the lead singer of the Specials, came out, and the lead singer of this, Too Much Pressure, what's the name of that band? I can't. Selector, yeah, she came out, right? So eventually, it was great because on ska night, if you didn't wear it, you did not get in. So it was fashion has always had a lot to do with it in some weird way. But, so many things happened at this club that existed, and it was just about the time that gentrification was starting to happen in Chicago. So there were people buying houses next to this club, and it was in an old firehouse on the north side of the city. It was near all the blues clubs. And I've always loved that there's no accident that people who got into punk and music, they also liked a lot of different kinds of music. They studied classical music, or they were into blues, and now that punk has become Green Day, I hope I'm not insulting anyone, but, I go to blues shows now, and I see more ex-punk rockers at blues shows. Because that's the pure form, and that's what made it fun. Was it was pure, and it was somewhat dangerous, and it was queer, and it was gay, and it was bi, and it was everything. Back in '77, if somebody had purple hair, they did not have a job. They did not work at Wells Fargo, and now that's common. And it still blows my mind. I just saw a girl on the train, an 8-year-old girl working her phone and I'm like, what the hell? How does an 8-year-old kid do better on the damn thing than I do? So, and I so wish that so many of these people had lived to be grandma and grandpa punk. Because we never planned for that, So there's a lot of, it wasn't something that was going to age. We never thought about it that way. But now it's like, well, how do we do that? And we're still breaking new ground even at 65 years old. We're still doing it, and it's kind of weird. I could have put a lot more in there, but
Okay, Dawn, baby. Dawn Baird, an amazing DJ, amazing artist. He's
Lester Bangs.
the Lester Bangs.
I think punk and queer didn't really intersect more as they were just kind of woven into each other here in San Francisco. It just seemed like you didn't have to look real hard to find queer elements, in the music, in the bands, in the crowd, in the people that would gather. And I think one of the first sort of queer memories for me, I just moved to the city. It was around, I think 1981. It was a Halloween night at the Malule, and the Victims were playing. And they were great. I had seen them a few times before. They were kind of like one of our pet bands that we went to see all the time when we first moved here. And Nina Crawford, she screamed "sluts on stage," and these creatures, like 3 of them, they were referred to as sluts a go-go. They were Doris Fish and Miss X and Tippy, I think. They jump up on the monitors all over the stage, and they're just like electrifying mohawks, wadded up paper under their Technicolor type. It was like the craziest, creepiest, freakiest thing I'd ever seen. Doing all these blue gestures, and I was like, wow. These are my people. I decided that was one of the first times I was starting to see another thing. I remember someone turned me on to the Offs. I had a single called "You Fascinate Me," and it's a great song. It's still great. I play it when I DJ currently, and it's if you listen to the lyrics, it's clearly about Polk Street hustlers, and it's a brilliant song. It's very poignant to me. Then, as it went on, there's queer all over rock and roll, from then currently. I mean, we have our Pansy Division, we have Tribe A, we had the whole homocore movement that started with zines by Bruce Livers and G.B. Jones, and I remember also parade, a particular parade where a big group of people that I would label as punk rock. Punk rock was such a, I don't know, it was a place where misfits gravitated to. People who were strange or odd or ugly could become superstars with this new look, this new edginess, everything. And there was this group, they were a tow truck and they were pulling a fire car, a car painted up like a cop's car. And they were riding on top and people were skating along the side and picking up their boards and hitting the cop car. And the float itself was just covered with everyone from the freaks, the marginalized. Then I think someone hopped off at a certain point and they burned a gay flag, which I like that. But and I think the music that was playing with them was definitely punk rock. And I don't know. Like I said, I found queerness in punk all the way through. It's just one and the same, I think.
Thank you, Don. I want to mention something that I think something that really hit me in yesterday at the library when Penelope was talking, and the Art Institute in San Francisco, 78, 79, 80. It was this microcosm of the most amazing people. Jack was from the Art Institute. An incredible man named Arturo Galster, who unfortunately passed away this week, last year. Deborah Ayal, Penelope came from the Art Institute. An amazing photographer named Marcus Leatherdale, who now is, one of the most famous photographers in the world. He actually photographed for Search and Destroy a little bit of 77 and a little bit of 78 before he went to New York and started working for Robert Mapplethorpe and becoming Robert Mapplethorpe's protege. But one of the most, as working at the Strand, one of the most amazing experiences I ever had was, I used to call them the art gang. And they were mostly these kids that were at the Art Institute. And their leader was Lena Fellini, who was this amazing girl that looked like a Fellini movie. And they all drove Vespas. And I used to call them an art gang. And they would sweep up to the Strand, and it was Lena Fellini and Arturo and this wonderful guy named Jose, who was, I think, Brazilian. And they used to just deck themselves out in the most amazing sort of pop art outfits. And the Art Institute it had so much creativity, and it wasn't that it was queer, it wasn't that it was straight, it was just this amalgam of just so many amazing personalities. I mean, Rachel Weber, and Scott Reiser, who were the units, they came out of the Art Institute. Like I mentioned, Deborah, Jack
Jerome Kaya.
Jerome, definitely. If Jerome finally has a Facebook page, thank you very much. He's amazing, amazing artist. I would love a Jerome, actually. If it's anything I would ever invest in, would be an original Jerome. But somebody should definitely write about, whence and where came the Art Institute from 77. I mean, Karen Finley, one of the most amazing performance artists that she was at the Art Institute then. She was cocktail waitressing at the Condor while I was stripping at the Hungry Eye and doing doubles at the Garden of Eden. And I mean, it's just that place, there were always bands playing at the Art Institute, and anyway, that's just like my little 2 cents for the Art Institute, but amazing people. I mean, just an amazing period, so Jack, do you want to say anything about? Deborah Island used to drag me to see Jack's performances there, like around 78, early 79, in which Jack would like dye his hair about...
Shave my eyebrows.
Shave your eyebrows?
I do grow back. Yeah, they do grow back, but what a great look. I think I looked like I was 12 when I shaved my eyebrows, which was quite fun. I don't know what I would have to say about the Art Institute, but because I was there 75 to 78, and they started having performance classes, which is, and I met Deborah in that January of 78, which is when I moved back here and dyed my hair fire engine red. And so she and I did some I think kind of gender transgressive kind of performances, me being a queer man, her being a woman and straight identified woman and very voluptuous. And so we did some I think relatively transgressive for me as a straight man. I always wrestled with am I bi? But back in the 70s, bisexual for me was still a bad term, not something that was, it didn't have any kind of identity. You had to be gay or straight, unfortunately. And so I never quite had a handle on that. So yeah. So the other thing I was thinking of, I think Terence mentioned something that triggered for me, but I remember Grace Jones being on the float for the Stud at one of the gay pride parades.
Wow.
And so at some point she played for Trocadero Transfer that I saw her, but I mean, a true queer artist. I mean, she was something that I could identify with. I Need a Man. She had like shaved super short hair, but then this little white stripe and painted down the side of her head, and I just danced, that whole way, the whole length of Market. I need a man, I need a man, I need a man, perhaps a man like you. And disco was, it was, we like to dance. I mean, you danced and you did punk rock. It was all about just that part. So I never, as I think even Don said, it was woven in. There's at least in San Francisco, but as others have said, New York Dolls. I mean, David Bowie is transgressive. So we had queer icons, those of us who were of a certain age, coming into punk rock that we were already set up to make it be transgressive. The thing that came to me from the punk fanzine piece yesterday at the library, and I'm really grateful to Ruby Ray and everybody else who have set this up. I really want to give you a thanks of hand for that. And sort of like reclaiming some of this past, but punk was the breakdown of the band and the fan. I took on the name Jack Fan just because I loved Alicia Bridges, I loved the nightlife, but I also loved Wire, I loved all these bands, and so Romeo Void, I think there's like on Facebook there was a punk badges thing, and I put a Facebook, I posted a button that I had from Romeo Void and got like all kinds of smear stuff. Romeo Void, that's not punk, but they were from that scene. They came out of the Art Institute. They had the Mummers and the Paupers, which was a amalgam sort of dance band. I mean, they were doing covers. So there's a weird, as Don said, it was just woven in. We're queer and we're part of this scene. I never had any kind of problems from any other San Franciscans about being gay. It just was never an issue, and so I was able to be a misfit here.
I was going to say, I thought I was androgynous. Remember that word? I thought I was androgynous before I was gay. I was horrified when I found out gay men having sex with someone. I'm like, good Lord, that means what is that all about? Because, it was about being androgynous. You can look at pictures of David Bowie back in that era, and it's insane how gorgeous he is. And he looked like that up close, too, because when we went to that show, there was God. But, I can think, back then we used to go to record stores, and walk by the record store and wait for the album to come out. And I can think of 3 albums that came out that really worked with us. We're talking about Patti Smith or that when that first album came out. But the first one was David Bowie, not Low, Heroes, with the hair, and he was posing, and he mentioned Grace Jones. When everybody saw, went nuts. The first poster of her with one leatherette, sitting like this, with that Issey Miyake outfit on, and her hair, flat hair, and it looked, and when she first came out, they kind of worked the is it a boy, is it a girl thing. And and I love the Eurythmics, but Annie Lennox wouldn't have happened quite that way if Grace Jones hadn't done it first. It's just, like you say, photography and fashion and music and art, and all of it was all mixed together. And
right. I mean, when I was a teenager, it was so funny. I was living in the burbs, and the boarding house was an amazing place in the mid-'70s, and I would go see Bette Midler there, I would go see Patti Smith there, I went and saw John Cale, I went and saw, B-52s played there. It was sort of our Max's Kansas City in San Francisco. It was on Bush Street in the Tender Knob, and it was just an amazing club. I mean, everybody came through there, and it wasn't a Bill Graham kind of thing. It was more like, a little bit more underground.
I wanted to say one other thing before Don talks about somebody mentioned Polk Street, and for us back then, I mean, as many of you know this, but for us back then, we didn't have the internet, and so to find out what was going on new, we had to go to the bookstore, but we also had to go to the magazine store. And so there was a great store on Polk Street, which used to be the gay nexus when I moved here in 75. Polk Street was still the major sort of gay and gramophone, but it was like, I need to find something new, so I would go and find New Musical Express, but find other magazines, and that was how you found out what music was going on, but also you're exposed to the queer and the fashion and everything else. And so trying to find something new, somebody else said yesterday, it's like, has what I'm looking for been written yet? So I was going to the stores, and that was in the gay cultures, that you had to go to Polk Street or Union Street, which was the gay mecca back in the 50s. So just following San Francisco and its queer culture in order to find out what I wanted to do for punk.
Yeah, like the record stores all had magazine sections. There was that magazine store called The Magazine.
Yeah, it's still there.
It's still there. That's what you did all day. You would go and just hang out and look at all the records, all the magazines, buy things, buy the zines were beginning to be distributed. You could find treasures all day long. You could do the same thing in the hate. It's really kind of that's all changed so completely. Now we have a few outlets for zines and whatnot. I'm totally impressed more recently with some of these archives becoming available online. In abundance. It's fantastic. These archives are being developed because we don't have those places to go anymore, really, to just browse.
Well, just to interject, my Bible as a kid was a magazine called Rock Scene. Anybody remember Rock Scene? Lisa Robinson, Richard Robinson?
Oh yeah.
It was like my 16 magazine. I mean, I would have to search for it, and there was one magazine store on Geary Street in the theater district, and I would come in on Baird, and I would have to do student rush at the Current Theater and do a play or something, and then I would spend like an hour just poring over magazines at that magazine store. But I'd always get a Rock Scene, I always got an NME, I always got an interview magazine, and does anyone remember After Dark?
Yeah.
I still want to do a book about After Dark.
But After Dark was freaking fabulous. Speaking about queer intersections, I mean, nobody knew, it was like one of those inside things, like tongue in cheek. I mean, it was editors from New York who did a ballet magazine, dance magazine.
Do you remember that that's how you knew somebody was gay? They had
Had it on the coffee
they had
table.
After Dark out.
On the coffee table,
Okay.
just right there, or interview, kind of like.
Interview maybe.
Yeah, interview.
And to tie it back to the Screamers, my favorite song was "You Don't Love Me, You Love Magazines." My boyfriend often said to me.
Right, but just that 3D world, like Don was talking about, of like just having to search for this stuff. I mean, it was so much more fun to go into Gramophone or Tower Records, or to just have it in your hands and, you know, peruse, and not have to just like immediately gratify yourself with, you know, something right there online. I mean, it just made it much more fun, much more fun.
Did you mention the Palms? I mean, that was important.
Oh yeah.
Hang out there. No one knew who he was.
Yeah, Polk Street was so beautiful. In fact, I nominated a building the other day on Facebook. The most ugliest building in San Francisco is 4175 Polk Street. Polk in California, where the Crustagen is. It's like that 3-story, there's the market on the basement. But in the 70s, it used to be the most amazing, almost 24-hour coffee shop called The Raven. It started out as The Haven, or started out as The Raven and went into The Haven. It's either or, whatever, but all the teenage runaways hung out there, including myself, and it was just the most amazing place. And now in its place is this just horrendous building, and we talked about it the other day. It not only is ugly, but it has ugly energy. It just, you look at it and it's like, what is going on here?
Is that the one with the elevator?
Yeah,
Okay.
with the Crustagen.
Crap.
Been there a long time.
Okay.
So anyway, does anybody have any questions for us, or? Okay.
You said your name is Erich? Okay, so you said, I wish someone would write about the artist of 2 days. When someone says that, I want that person to write about it. So, because I think it sounds like you want it to happen, you should make it happen.
I would love to. I mean, Penelope would be an incredible reference. Deborah Isle, Jack Johnson. I mean, yeah, thank God there's still people that are here to, you know, yammer on about it. I would love to. Thank you, Alicia. I think you put a little pin in my hat.
Something about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to raise a question. You know, the boarding house was run by a man named David Allen, and I never knew his orientation. Did anyone know anything about him?
No, I just remember Vail. Do you remember John Wasserman, the critic?
Yeah.
John Wasserman was a critic for the Examiner, and he was like the most amazing. If anybody wants to read a great reportage about San Francisco in the 70s, there's a book that his sister put out. John Wasserman died in, I think, the late 80s of a heart attack. But his sister put out a book of all his reviews in the Examiner. And it's just incredible. And he basically lived at the boarding house. And yeah, I mean, just an amazing place. Anybody else?
I think Gramophone is super important.
Yeah.
Hi, I'd like to hear a little bit more detail about the places that Don would go to. I mean, you didn't elaborate that a lot about some of the bars that you used to go to and hang out. I mean,
Well, I was, if you're talking about Polk Street still, there were like all of those places where you could look at magazines and stuff, but there were also about 4 or 5, maybe 6 places where you could look at other types of magazines and movies and booths. And one was called the Ben-Hur.
oh yeah.
I don't know, I just have an affection for that one in particular. I think I initially knew someone who lived above it, and it was a really amazing apartment.
I mean, more like the bars. Where would you go to see bands?
There was one of the first bars that I ever hung out in the city here was called, it was off Polk Street, I think, on Geary. It was called Previews.
Wow.
Sorry.
And I don't know, we just went in there, the bartender was friendly to us, and I just noticed certain things, like they had copies of Sylvester's earliest recordings, you know, standing up behind the bar. And this is the first place I ever saw a show by like Doris Fish and
Doris Fish and Sluts.
yeah, Sluts Are Go. Yeah, it was hilarious too, and kind of scary, kind of punk rock actually. But where else? Let's see.
The I-beam.
I went to the I-beam. I lived at the I-beam nights forever. I mean, when I found out that whole building had been torn down, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I sat and started listing all the bands I had seen there, and it was incredible. I used to, let's see, I used to go to the Chatterbox. I love the Chatterbox. The On Broadway and the Mabuhay and the Stone up there.
Wasn't there a thing called the Blue Lamp?
Oh, yeah.
Blue
Very
Lamp,
sweet.
yeah.
I saw some queer shows there. Yeah.
Well,
The 181.
yeah, the 181.
Oh, the
Club.
181, right.
But not to interject, but south of Market in 1978 and 79, a lot of leather bars, the Web, the Rivet, what the Oasis is now used to be called the Plunge. A lot of bands played at the Plunge. That place was so easy back then. I mean, woo! So yeah, I mean, a Crime played at the Stud like as early as 77, I think. 76, 77.
Brightwing played at the Stud.
Private closed the old Stud. Now, holy cow, they played the last night at the old Stud.
And I remember even seeing people like Etta James play the Stud, you know, amazing Etta James, you know, people like Etta James, Bonnie Raitt would play the Stud. It was, you know, very varied. It was like the whole spectrum.
I just did a count of, for the hell of it, looking at an old gay magazine of the number of leather bars and cool clubs that were in between Market and Folsom and like Fifth and Van Ness. There were like 60 clubs, and now there's 4.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. That you know, that's why everybody moved to San Francisco. Sorry, y'all. That's why we had to come out here.
Yeah, there was, before Paradise Lounge, there was Phoebe's.
Headquarters.
I wasn't here then, but I remember seeing the ad.
No, the headquarters was where everybody went after the old Stud
Oh
closed.
yeah, headquarters.
And it stayed open all night long. You could meet anybody in there.
Headquarters was great.
Phoebe's for Sixers to go.
Yeah, Phoebe's had a buffet which fed a lot of people. Anybody
I always
else?
wanted a truck driver to accidentally, like a straight truck driver, just sort of stray into Phoebe's. Phoebe's where I used to go for cigarettes, you know, like after midnight. But it was like, everybody would be in there in flannel and they were playing country and western. I thought, I'd just love to see some guy from a big rig wandering here and see how long it took him to realize it was going. Do you remember the Barrett on Folsom?
Yeah.
Had a reputation for fisting. I was interested in Willie DeVille in Wing DeVille, their song Cadillac Moon references the Barracks because apparently they played their way back before the scene was really gelling here.
Oh.
Just like Johnston.
Tony?
Yeah, when I was doing some research a couple of years ago for my book, I spoke with Brad Layton, and he told me, I was very surprised to hear this, but he told me he thought that the punk scene was homophobic. And I was surprised, because I had never really gotten that vibe from the scene at all. But he said, oh yeah, he was like, almost kind of confused about it, like, no, it was a homophobic scene. It was like you had a chip on his shoulder about it. And I was wondering, where would somebody...
You know, I can't, I mean, the punk scene actually, there was this horrible initiative called the Briggs Initiative in 1978, which basically this stupid senator was going to, pass a bill that banned anybody teaching that was gay. And the punks had a million defeat Briggs initiatives against, The only time it was ever sort of around the mid-'80s when Mabuhay kind of turned into the suburban, you know, a lot of violent kids. I got beaten up once in the alley when I was about 24 there. You know, it was just like a dumb fuck that, you know, was ass from the elbow.
Well, but at the same time, the hardcore kids were on, had to make money somehow. And some of them were on Polk Street. You know, 53rd and 3rd, that was our 53rd and 3rd.
Yeah. I was going to say that I was even in the 70s, very successful at picking up skinheads. So trust me, it wasn't homophobic. It wasn't homophobic.
Go Terence. Terence.
I was actually thinking that I would get kind of a different sort of attitude from the gays about being into rock and roll or punk.
Yeah, that still goes up.
And it's still.
Well, there was a period where you couldn't go anywhere in San Francisco without hearing that blistering mechanical disco. It wasn't the, like, good disco. It was that weird European disco that sounded like Muzak disco. I mean, it was everywhere. So, yeah, and that was very gay. And
Remember when Ethel Merman did the disco song? It was over.
the disco album.
She did a disco album. It was over. That disco stuff and stuff like it was over.
Anyway, anybody else?
Wait, no, so you mentioned this person, someone Fellini,
Lena Fellini.
Okay, so she sounds very good. I wasn't around for this. Can I look her up?
I can give you some pictures of her, definitely. She's.
Still around?
Does anybody know where she lives?
Let's go there. No.
Richard, do you know where Lena Fellini lives? Richard?
She lives in New Jersey, she's married.
Who was that?
She's married and she lives in New Jersey.
Oh, thank you,
She
Greg.
sounds interesting. Like, I want to look at her pictures and see her.
Oh, yeah, quite a pistol. You'd love her. I'll let you know. Anybody?
Speaking of the whole gay skinhead thing, there was that one gay skinhead movie that was filmed on top of one of the buildings, and they got reported because people from one of the office buildings that was higher actually saw them filming, and so the police came up there and caught them, and they were all inside of a cage. This is like some weird thing that
What year is this?
I believe that was like 83 or 84.
Do you remember the name of it?
I can't remember the name, but yeah, it was on a videotape. I lost it a long time ago.
Can I also interject that, you know, we didn't talk about trans people at all, but, you know, we had...
Ginger.
Right?
Yeah, we didn't talk about Ginger yesterday. It was a shame because...
Right, because, I mean, Punk Rock's still there.
Peter, a couple of years ago when Facebook was just starting, it was Ginger Coyote's birthday. If anybody doesn't know, Ginger Coyote was an amazing presence at Mabuhay. She is the editor and name of Punk Globe magazine, which is still going to this day. And it was her birthday, and I just said, Ginger, the first time I met you, you had me in a headlock, and you made me say Jennifer Blowdryer's the Marilyn Monroe of punk rock. Say it, say it! And she laughed. She said, I can see that happening, yeah. But no, Ginger Coyote.
Yeah, and last year at the Baird, we gave Ginger Coyote a lifetime award, a lifetime achievement award.
She deserves it.
Yeah.
I was actually going to mention her as one of those points where you know, punk and queer intersect. Because I mean, Punk Globe was the first magazine I picked up ever. You know, when I came to the city, and I remember, you know, her lists, the top 10. You know, I think the #1 single was 100% White Girl by Victims, and I bought it. You know, I bought and yeah, it was something I looked at all the time every time I could get it. So yeah, it was interesting.
I have to say that I also, when I first moved here to San Francisco, I knew Miss X through mutual friends, and I found myself in a car one time with Miss X going someplace, sitting in the back seat, and I mentioned Ginger Coyote because I also knew her through other mutual friends, and she said, Ginger, you mean Frank and Tater? She was not well liked by the other queens in town, trust me. She was not. Because she was a little obnoxious, as everybody who knows Ginger knows.
Just some little drag queen,
Yeah, you say
I think the word is formidable.
it? Yeah.
Awe-inspiring.
Well, she also was a friend of my, she had Lenore Cottrell in her band, White Trash Debutantes.
Yeah, great.
And I hold it against Ginger to this day that she did not treat Lenore well. Yeah. I mean, if I get to talk to Ginger face to face about her, I will say, you should have treated Lenore better because she really was one of the best things in your band.
And just to go back to what Peter brought up about trans, Wayne County, Jane County, was very, very formative in the New York scene, which, I mean, San Francisco is, it's seen, but, everything about San Francisco is informed by New York Rocker, by Soho Weekly News, by all of that. And so Wayne and Jane County was like very, very early, a long time with like Patti Smith and the Dictators and bands like that. So
And also Gary Floyd from the Dicks. Who lives here now and he's great.
He's still going.
Still going. Ended up being homosexual.
And a great kiss.
Amazing drag moments that I had never thought of or heard about, but I've seen pictures more recently where, I mean, he's like dressed like a psychotic nurse, and it's very wonderful stuff.
what were you saying that nobody has commented on?
Well, okay, so he brought up Bambi, and no one's spoken about it.
Anybody read Bambi's autobiography?
I
I just thought Bambi. She has this whole chapter, like I just went to zeros, and she has a whole chapter on Baba, and which is very cute. I think it's very cute, but I'm embarrassed to not Baba, but I thought it was sweet. But yeah, Bambi was amazing. I remember one time the Mad Bambi coming in shortly after having kids and just going up to Baba. Look! Bambi was nothing like your dad.
I remember when Bambi was writing that book, she said that her editor and publishers were, they had a look at the rough copy and they were like, put more sex in it. And so she did, and I wonder if that's that chapter.
But that Gary, if folks don't know, his health is doing better, and also he just recently recorded a song with James Williamson from the Stooges, "Talking My Pocket," and so you can YouTube it and find it. Yeah, Gary's doing good. Lives out in Athens now. One for the.
Okay, anybody else? 'Cause there's another one after us.
I just want to say this, the whole trans thing was linked, okay, Bambi knew Romy Haig for Berlin, and there was on the, everybody remembers this cover, the album cover For Your Pleasure, for Roxy Music, on the front cover, her name back then was Drushenka, but it's a mandolier. And so there's this whole trans, it's like
No, Amanda Lear is not out though as transgender.
No. Well,
Really?
No, really? Yeah, that's what. Yeah. Okay, so that. Anybody?
I want to throw out two more names. I think, which Richie Dietrich. I don't know if anybody talked about it. Stepped out for a minute. Richie Dietrich from the Nuns. Very out. I think kind of helped make the scene, gay friendly. And Jim Jacoy, who's a person I just think is one of the sweetest people on earth. But also, one of the early published photographers from the scene.
Yeah. There's a few more names. Not always are.
Take the floor.
Oh yeah, Dominique, that's right. You shouldn't forget Dominique.
Yeah, I thought she was going to be here. Well, Dominique didn't come out for a while.
True. Well, but when she was in Lorraine, she was gay as hell. Yeah.
You have to be around it.
Yeah.
But they're very early person of gay persuasion, very low profile, was Bob Basile. And he should have been here tonight. He's one of the earliest that I met personally, and like most of the people in the early thing who did art. I mean, he wasn't just a parasite. You know, he made posters. And then there's also a lesbian woman who worked for Search and Destroy. And I recruited her really early. Her name's Stephanie.
Stephanie Krishoff.
In my newsletter, there's a great narrative she wrote about being queer, gay, whatever the word is, in early comics. It's in my, what is it, September? It's in the August newsletter on my website.
We actually invited Stephanie here.
What?
We invited her.
Oh, good. But I don't think she has a car.
Yeah, she lives in Concord.
Inherited house in some hellhole.
Concord.
One more question back here. Did you have a question?
I kind of did. Maybe there's better places to ask this question too, but you mentioned at the opening of all this, some lesbian-owned nightclubs where maybe some of the punk subculture existed, and it's something that some people have documented, but it's something that's totally disappeared as much as punk areas have. Lesbian-owned businesses and some bars and nightclubs. I was kind of curious if maybe piecing together like some of those like establishments that used to exist where punk subculture existed.
Well, get the book Wide Open Town. It's very scholarly, but it completely covers San Francisco from the 30s through the early 60s. And like where the Chi-Chi Club on Broadway was where Mona's, 440 Broadway was Mona's, which was an extremely popular lesbian nightclub, which was right next to Finocchio's. And but Wide Open Town is really a great, it's very pithy and pedantic, but it's got all the information. Okay, so.
Thank you.